Hi, I'm Dr. Marianne Cintron, founder of Step by Step Dyslexia Solutions. I have a very important story I want to share with you. And before I do, I'm going to share my screen because I want to share with you a PowerPoint that I put together. Did you know that 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic and 35% of US entrepreneurs are dyslexic? So if you're not dyslexic and you're an entrepreneur, chances are someone on your left or your right is dyslexic. So first of all, I want to thank you for being here. And before I share how we can unlock the genius mind of the dyslexic child, I'd like to share a little bit about my personal journey. When I was a young girl, my mom always wanted me to be a nun or a teacher, maybe a decorator. I was one of 7 children and I was the middle child. But my parents wanted me to go to college. I put myself through college, but I didn't know what I wanted to be. My mom didn't want me to be an entrepreneur because she said they're unemployed and the income is unstable. And she saw my dad in and out of work. He was an entrepreneur, but he had diabetes-related illnesses. So when I graduated from UC Santa Barbara, I got my liberal arts degree, and I was going to be a retail buyer. My second career, 10 years later, I was in the technical field, started at General Dynamics and worked at ITT Barton. That's where I met my husband, Will, and we've been married 32 wonderful years now. But my third career wasn't until my kids were in kinder and first grade. Actually, they were in preschool. I volunteered in their preschool. I decided to get my substitute teaching certificate, and I worked in the classroom, and I also worked at the behavioral hospital. That's where God instilled in my heart a desire to help the children who had some learning challenges. So I just put up my beautiful music book there. When I was in the classroom helping my children, I was a room mom, and I saw how strategically those teachers taught reading, writing, and spelling. And I knew if teachers weren't trained to work with dyslexic children, if teachers weren't trained to teach reading and writing, they would set those kids on the wrong trajectory. So my passion was stirred. It wasn't until I earned my second master's, which is 4 years later, where I learned about dyslexia. And I joined the International Dyslexia Association, of which I'm now a board member in the Tri-County branch. And I studied Sam Orton and Anna Gillingham and their methodology to teach dyslexic children. It was called word blindedness back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and early 60s. And I went on my own studies and I learned about a woman who was using music with her reading program. She's no longer with us, but she instilled in me the passion to use music with reading. So I learned that kids were making 1 to 3 year gains in only 6 weeks. There was a student I had who was an 8th grader being raised by her grandfather because her mom was in prison. And he said that Daniela, that's not really her name, but that's the name I give her, that she loved music. And he wanted her to be in our program because he thought she could be successful when other programs after school weren't helping her because she wasn't interested in them. So after being with us for 2 weeks, he started noticing a change in her behavior at home, and their battlefield became a playground. She enjoyed going to school. They enjoyed laughing. And she, she made about a year gain after 3 weeks. After 6 weeks, she made 3-year gains in reading vocabulary, fluency, and comprehension. Her grandfather started crying and he said, "This is a miracle." And he repeated, "Our home was a battlefield and now she gets along with people." He asked me a question that changed my life forever. "Are you a doctor?" Well, that was, I believe, the Holy Spirit prompting me to go back to school, get my doctorate, and share this message with you. That dyslexic people no longer have to feel dumb. And they can learn. They can be lifelong learners. They can go to college if they want. So I bring peace to your home by helping your dyslexic child read. and we turned the battlefield into a playground. So the problem is, we weren't born with a reading brain like we were to see and hear. Reading is a man-made thing, but God did give us the brain parts to all fit together so we can develop that reading brain. So as a result, when we received the printing press back in the Industrial Revolution, 20% of our population, the dyslexic population, dropped off. Suddenly, people who were bright, brilliant, creative people felt inferior and dumb. So in our high schools today, 35% of our high school dropouts are dyslexic. And in our juvenile court system, 88% of juveniles are illiterate. In our prison system, 66% of inmates cannot read beyond a 4th grade level. I know these are staggering statistics, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm going to share with you how we can unlock the genius mind of the dyslexic child. I'm going to use the acronym GENIUS because I love looking at the geniuses of old. Here's Albert Einstein. G stands for gifts. We need to recognize the gifts of our children at a young age, and we need to help them shine in those areas. We need to help build their self-esteem, get them reading, let them love learning to read with beginner books when they're in kinder and preschool, kinder, 1st grade. Read with them. And when they enjoy reading, the gateway to learning is reading. So very important. When dyslexic children try to read, they'll memorize those words. So when you think of the reading brain as the left side of the brain, and the right side of the brain is the creative side, or where we store pictures. When kids are memorizing words as pictures, they're putting those pictures to the right side of the brain. So when they want to retrieve those sounds and symbols to read, they're not in the left side of the brain. So that's what we want to do, is retrain their brain. So the left side is the language center. When dyslexic children try to read, they're going to memorize those words. And so people think they know how to read, but give them words that are not familiar, and they will glance and guess at those words. So they're going to maybe guess the beginning of the word, but not the ending of the words. And they're very embarrassed. Their peers are going to want to help them. Their teachers are going to want to help them read. And the older and older they get, the more embarrassing it gets when they're in a circle and their peers are reading better than they are. I have a story of a very good friend of mine named Rook, who is a brilliant genius, and kind of a brilliant genius. He's genius, he's an artist, he's creative. He recalls when he was in the 3rd grade, he was put in the low reading group. A week later, he was put in the next low reading group. Another week later, he was put in the lowest reading group, until somebody had the bright idea to give him a test. And they gave him a gifted test, and he shot up to the top of the list. So it takes a teacher who is knowledgeable and recognizes these bright children who just can't read or write. This is dyslexia, and it impacts 1 in 5 kids and adults. So E stands for enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is different from gifts. I want to share this little video with you.
Well, the internet is melting over a toddler who's making it known she is definitely a big girl now.
Did you do anything in the bathroom? Nothing?
I was putting some lipstick on, and then I was giving my phone.
So you put, what'd you put on?
Lipstick on.
Did you ask anybody if you could put it on?
I asked myself.
Where'd you buy it at?
My lipstick?
Yeah.
I buy it from Home Depot.
Oh, Home Depot, huh? Instead of getting mad, a Florida dad got his phone out and took this adorable
So I wanted
video
to
of his
share that
daughter
with you.
after she
Because we need to see what children are interested when they're young, and take note of that as they get older. How many children love face painting? How many children can do face painting themselves? When I was co-teaching high school math, we had a student who wore so much makeup and it was really flamboyant. And rather than criticize her, I really encouraged her that she should use her skill and maybe do makeup in theater and the arts. And we need to recognize the gifts of the enthusiasm that these children have and steer them in the right direction. You know, we let our children try many sports when they were young, involve them in music, but ultimately where they were enthusiastic is where they started thriving. So these dyslexic children are not meant to fit in, they're meant to stand out. I want to tell you the story of Jillian Lynn. She was a third grader in a little wiggle bottom back in the 1930s, and her mom was very concerned that she wasn't reading. Her mom took her to the doctors, and the doctor put her in a large room with windows. He turned on the radio and he walked out, and he told her, we'll be right back. I'm just going to talk to your mom. Well, when the mom and the doctor looked in the window, they saw Jillian spinning around, dancing. And the doctor said, there's nothing wrong with your little girl. She just needs to be moving. She's a dancer. So Jillian's mom got her involved with dancing. And at the age of 20, she was, Sleeping Beauty in the Royal Opera House. And then when she was 50 years old, the directors of two famous musicals came to her to be the choreographer, and that was for the musical Cats and the musical Phantom of the Opera. So Jillian Lynn is not with us anymore. She is passed away at the ripe old age of 93, but what a contribution she gave us. N stands for neuroscience. Dyslexia is defined as neurobiological in origin. It's a student's inability to read, write, and spell. And I will say that, well, they say it's a learning disability, but I like to refer to it as a learning difference because the brain can be retrained. Again, 35% of the entrepreneurs in the United States are dyslexic. 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. So the past geniuses, let me see, did I get the right slide here? The past geniuses, okay, this is some of the statistic. Oops, let me pause this. The past geniuses are Steven Spielberg, Albert Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci. They, goodness gracious, let me see if I can pause this. So N stands for neuroscience. The definition of dyslexia by the International Dyslexia Association is that it's neurobiological in origin, and it's the inability for a student to read, write, and spell. And it's a learning disability. But I like to say that it's a learning difference, and it's evidenced in a child's inability to read, write, and spell. So the left side of the brain is the language center. The right side of the brain is the creative side, the music side. When I did my doctoral research, I learned that the left angular gyrus on the left side is the language center, and the right angular gyrus wants to take over the reading of dyslexic people. So it's going to send over the words out of order, the letters out of order. It'll send kelp instead of clap, farm instead of from, saw instead of was. And so what we do is we put music in the left ear and we send it to the right side of the brain, giving it a job it likes to do. Try that. Play classical music in your left ear when you try to read or watch the news. It's not invasive at all. It's very calming to your brain. And then we send spelling exercises in the right ear and it crosses to the left side of the brain. And we develop the left side of the brain like Pilates of the brain. Now, this is based on the neuroscience of Dr. Roger Sperry. In the 1960s, he was popular for his split brain theory. And he worked with seizure patients. And 20 years later, in 1980, he won a Nobel Prize for his split brain theory. And he said at his conferences, if educators would take this information into the classroom and use it, but teachers weren't doing that. In fact, what I'm doing with music, a neuroscientist told me, is tapping into quantum science. Nobody is doing this. In my doctorate research, imagine kids coming to me in the at-risk level. They were in the 10 to 20 percentile range. Return to intervention is what it was called. And those with the music improved to the 60 percentile range over here on the other side of the hill, bell curve. And then those without music still made great improvement after 12 weeks. They achieved the 40 percentile range. If you want to see the bar graph, without the music, students reached the 40 percentile range. With the music, they were achieving 60%. Now, this is 12 weeks of intervention, 4 or 5 days a week. And with COVID and this online platform that we have, we're recommending 3 days a week for our Jumpstart program. And then we recommend 2 days a week for Keep Up program. I stands for innovation. So the 4 areas of strength for the dyslexic person are the arts, entrepreneurism, architecture, and engineering. So if your child needs a degree to be an architect or an engineer, we can help with accommodations in college. We can help with an assessment that allows them to receive those accommodations. But if your child prefers trade school or technical school, that is perfectly fine also. All we know is we do not want them dropping out of high school. 2/3 of the kids who don't reach 4th grade reading level or grade level reading by 4th grade, so they're not reading at the end of 3rd grade level, 2/3 of them will drop out of high school. So we need all of our kids to be graduating high school. 2/3 of those kids who do drop out of high school will end up in prison or on welfare. This is more data that's very staggering. So I mentioned in the previous slide, we have a Jumpstart program. We get your child reading 3 days a week, and we go for about 30 to 40 sessions. And then we have a Keep Up program, and we recommend 2 days a week. And then we also have a level, so we have level 1 and level 2. If you're interested yourself to be trained to work with your child, the level 1 is my step-by-step reading program that plays music in the left ear and spelling exercises in the right ear. And the level 2 is a deeper dive into Orton Gillingham, and we integrate it with my step-by-step reading program. So here are some of the geniuses. Did you know Walt Disney was dyslexic? My latest book, Dyslexia, A Trait of Genius, Unlock the Genius Mind of Your Dyslexic Child. It's available on Amazon in the digital file, and you can also purchase it from me. The U stands for unique. There's a unique approach to helping children read. Sam Orton and Anna Gillingham came up with a methodology. So I want to ask you, how many of you learn better when you're seeing something? How many learn better when you're hearing something? Do you learn better when you have hands-on? Or do you learn better when you're speaking? I think about how many of us share a story with a friend and then we answer, we might have a problem and then we answer our own problem just by speaking. Well, we want to use all of our senses when we're helping kids read. We call those the modalities. When we use multiple modalities to teach, we're accessing many parts of the brain, and it helps with the learning process. So we want our kids to graduate so they can read and write and speak, and we want them to love learning. So the next, and this is a picture of our reading program, step-by-step reading with 13 books, manipulatives, we call them our tools, and the music app, CDSM. So S stands for success. How many of you remember taking your children to the library when they were young for reading? And they would bring back a dozen books or so and read them over and over again. And you could hardly wait to go back to the library and read some more. Well, that's not the reality in the home of a dyslexic child. In fact, dyslexic children have a lot of anxiety when they're asked to read in the classroom, even as adults. When dyslexic adults are asked to read, there's panic. I have a podcast, Dyslexia Solutions, and I've had several dyslexic people tell me they're just afraid to be on a podcast. They're afraid of public speaking. Many people are, but dyslexic people really aren't even comfortable speaking in a room of close friends sometimes. So how many of you ever received a C- in a class and you were so glad to get that C-, you just want to get through with that class and not see that teacher ever again? How many of you ever had a C- in a class and you really wish you would have received a higher grade because you were competing with other students who got A's and B's? Well, imagine our nation sees a C- as proficient. Crazy, right? So even kids getting proficient are struggling. 2/3 of our students are not even at the C- level. And 1/3 of those students are at the failure level. So we have a reading crisis that's been going on for a long time. If kids aren't reading by 4th grade, they're at risk of dropping out of high school and going to prison. So let's build their self-esteem, get them reading. I want to share with you a story of Christina. She's on our board and she won the Miss Yosemite Valley title, and she competed for Miss California this year, and she actually placed in the top 10. She's a dyslexic gal who graduated from UC Davis in veterinary sciences, and she now is in a veterinarian program, graduate school, to be a vet. Very excited. We have my little student Cruz, didn't know his letter names or sounds when he was ready to go into 2nd grade. He worked with us. After a year, he was reading at a 3rd grade level, and he exited special ed for reading. When he was entering 4th grade, he was reading at a 5th grade level. And now he's entering 5th grade and he's reading at a 6th grade level, comprehending even higher. And we have little Cameron, who loves to read and write. All the kids have their challenges, but we want to give them their interest in reading, stir up that interest. So in closing, I just want to thank you for your time. If what I have shared has inspired you, I'm going to ask you a few things. I know you have questions and I'm here to answer them all, but let me ask you some questions. Would you send me parents who are homeschooling their kids and you know they're struggling with reading? Would you consider being one of our sponsors? You could sponsor for general costs of our nonprofit, and you could sponsor a school and purchase one of my books for the school. You could purchase some of these t-shirts for these dyslexic children to wear with pride, that dyslexia is a trait of genius. And you could even go to our website and make a monthly donation if you would. Help get our message forward. You could email me for my books, A Message of Hope, How Music Enhances Reading for Dyslexic Children, Prisms of Brilliance is on Amazon, and also Dyslexia, a Trait of Genius. You are awesome. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you like this podcast in YouTube and you share it with others. Remember, dyslexia is a trait of genius. You can reach me at dyslexia-solutions.com. And You can call me 626-629-3024. Finally, you can schedule time to meet with me at meetmarianne.com. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.